I'm Carl Arundel and you're watching In Focus. Now, I'm delighted to be joined today on this autumn afternoon on the edges of Richmond Park by Imran Khan, the former Pakistan cricket captain with a glittering international career spanning 2 decades and now one of Pakistan's high-profile politicians, having established his own party, the Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf, otherwise Movement for Justice, in 1996. He is also a renowned philanthropist, having provided the funding base for a number of established charities. He is Chancellor of the University of Bradford and founder and chairman of the Board of Governors of the Shaukat Khanum Memorial Centre, Cancer Hospital and Research Centre. Imran Khan, Salaam Alaikum, and welcome again to Islam Channel.
Wa Alaikum Salam.
Now, at the end of last month, according to one of UK's premier newspapers, you shocked Pakistan's political establishment by drawing over 100,000 people to attend Lahore's largest rally in 20 years. It was described as a tipping point for you and your party. Was this a tipping point as far as you're concerned?
Yes, it was a tipping point. Tipping point because our party was always credible. People trusted us, but we were not viable. So what it did was this massive crowd, it broke the viability barrier. And suddenly, the Pakistan political scene has changed.
Now, you say the political scene has changed. I think you've said recently that the problem in Pakistan right now is that we have no leadership and no direction. Is your escalation in popularity more about the dissatisfaction with the existing ruling Pakistan People's Party, or the lack of confidence in the official opposition, the Pakistan Muslim League?
Well, we have, my party has been consistent. That's one thing we've been consistent. We've attacked corruption, which in the beginning was stopping Pakistan from moving forward. Today it's destroying our country. So we've been consistent in that stand. And also we've been wanting Pakistan to be a sovereign country. So we've been against this war on terror. But the reason why we've suddenly, we've been saying the same things for a long time, but suddenly this explosion of popularity of our party and the whole political scene changing in the sense that suddenly this party is gaining momentum at a pace where the other parties are almost disintegrating. And it's because of total disillusionment with the other political parties. Parties who have been in power for, off and on for the last 40, 50 years. So people feel that these parties no longer can solve the problems. In fact, they are the problem of Pakistan. And secondly, the leadership of these parties is mired in corruption. Both the major parties, their leaders, have billions of dollars stashed abroad. Bank balances, property abroad. And so their disillusionment, of course, has helped us gain this popularity.
You talked, when I've spoken to you in the past, about Mr. 20%, Mr. 30%. Does that still go on?
Well, corruption has really turned into plunder. It's no longer corruption. They're just looting the country. And state institutions are collapsing. The railways collapsed. The Pakistan Airlines is on the verge of collapse. The steel mill, I'm talking about the big government corporations, the electricity board, it's incurring a loss of $1 trillion in about 3 years. So bear in mind that our total tax collection is about 1.9 trillion rupees. So $1 trillion of just goes losses in the electricity board. So it's total mismanagement and corruption. And that's why people want to change.
In recent statements, you seemed confident that you possessed the solution to Pakistan's dependency on aid, and the country's, as you just mentioned, the crippling electrical power shortages, which have resulted from years of neglect in investment in the infrastructure of the power grid. Now, I understand that you believe that also the high levels of corruption have been a phenomenal component of the meltdown, if you like, that Pakistan is going through. Now, you believe that the end of Pakistan's aid dependency and the rebuilding of the power grid for electricity power supply could arise from the introduction of measures to prevent nationwide power theft on the one side, and by putting an end to the estimated £21 billion a year of tax avoidance. Are these realistic aspirations? Do you really think that your political career, and I say this, your life even, would last very long if you became, to all intents and purposes, the next sort of Robin Hood of Pakistan?
Well, look, life and death is in the Almighty's hands. This is a misconception that we have control over our life. For Pakistan to be viable, the twin challenges have to be taken on head on. One is tax evasion. Pakistan at the moment has the lowest tax GDP ratio anywhere in the world, 8.2%. India has 18%. If we can get up to 18%, we become viable. But that's not our tax potential is much more than that. Secondly, the other problem is corruption. Now, unless we tackle corruption, this state just cannot go on. As I said, the government corporations have collapsed. It's moving towards a failed state. Criminals have taken over the country. It's like lunatics taken over the asylum. And so unless we tackle these twin problems, we are not viable. We are a failed state. And we have no option. If you want, like me, who wants to live in Pakistan and die in Pakistan, then the last thing we can afford to do is to sit back and watch what's happening. We have all to be active now. And hence my party has taken off. Because people who were not political or who were not interested in politics suddenly realize now that the country is fighting for its survival. And to survive, we have to collect taxes and fight corruption.
Now, nobody's going to disagree, I think, heavily with your maths. Yes, if you started to have a tax GDP somewhere close to India, the situation could dramatically turn around.
Well, just to give you an idea, our tax collection is just under 2 trillion rupees. Our expenditure is 3 trillion rupees. So we've got a gap of 1 trillion rupees. If we can get the tax GDP ratio up to India's 18%, we collect 4 trillion rupees. We've got a 1 trillion rupee surplus.
Yeah, but that's just not going to be that easy, is it? There are people who've got the money and who've got the power are not going to just come easily to starting to pay tax after years, decades of skimming.
Well, look, where Pakistan stands today, there are no easy solutions. Everything is going to be a struggle. But I feel that if you have the mandate of the people of Pakistan, if the people stand behind you, and that's what is the big difference. Once the people are with you and they trust you, you can do anything. And we've seen societies in much worse situation than Pakistan get out of it. But it requires the people to trust a government and then stand behind them. You need a government that starts with, leads by example, pays taxes. The Prime Minister declares their assets, their ministers, their parliamentarians. And then you expect others to do the same. And if they don't, then there is the stick, the carrot and the stick. And then you develop a tax culture. People's money should be spent on them. People should not feel that their money is going to go off in Swiss bank accounts. They should feel that their tax money is being spent on the people. They should see the benefits. It can be done. Bear in mind, I'm the biggest collector of charity in Pakistan. I collect more money probably than anyone in the country. And the moment people trust you, it is per capita the highest givers of charity, the Pakistanis. They give more charity than any other country. They give the lowest amount of taxes. But they give charity to people who they trust. And I believe it's going to be the same in government. You will have to inspire people to pay taxes. Others will have to be taken on and thrown into jail, just like in the US. There is no bail for a tax evasion. And same has to be in Pakistan.
Are we talking here about a sort of Asian Spring emulating what the Arab Spring that's taken place across the Middle East? Is this a radical shift that you're proposing?
In Pakistan, our Arab Spring took place in 2007 when everyone stood behind a Chief Justice. It was called the Lawyers' Movement. But it was a broad-based movement where everyone joined in, who stood behind a democratic change, a genuine democracy. Hence, the Chief Justice of Pakistan, who said no to a dictator, symbolized that movement, that movement for a genuine democracy, movement for rights, same as in the Arab Spring. Unfortunately, it was hijacked by the status quo. We had a political party, the second, the two main parties who've ruled Pakistan. The second big party, PMLN, they joined this movement, led it, and then destroyed it because it was part of that. Basically, the battle is between status quo and anti-status quo. And so PMLN was part of the status quo, led an anti-status quo movement, and used it for its own benefit and then destroyed it. But that same movement has come, it's coming back with a force. In fact, I call it the tsunami because it's gaining momentum. And that's what we saw in Lahore on the 30th of October. Never has there been such a big rally. The estimates are anything between 200 to 300,000 people.
So the tsunami revolution, I think you heard it here first, folks. Now, just to move on, a year ago you warned that the continued US war on terror in Afghanistan would result in the destabilization of Pakistan. Do the facts on the ground now, a year on, do they bear this out?
Of course. I mean, Pakistan is on its knees. Our security situation is desperate. We have now a problem all along our western borders. There's the tribal areas where there are 140,000 Pakistani troops stuck in this war on terror, costing the country enormous amount of money. We are taking away from our health and education.
But you receive subsidies for this, don't you?
Nothing compared to what we're losing out. The country is actually cannibalizing from its health and education to finance this war now. The total amount of the US aid in Pakistan has been under $20 billion. The money that the economy has lost, according to every government estimate, is over $70 billion. You can imagine that sports teams do not come to Pakistan. So what about the foreign investor? Where is he going? So investment money is leaving the country. The country cannot sustain this much longer.
Now, you've told your supporters...
And not to forget, 35,000 people dead. Same amount handicapped because of bomb explosions.
Now, you've told your supporters that you would end Pakistan's involvement in the war on terror and you would stop the use of drones in particular to attack militants in its tribal border areas. You have further said that you would tell the Americans that Pakistan cannot fight their war and Pakistan army cannot do its bidding any longer. You've added that the drone attacks on Al-Qaeda and Taliban militants are feeding terrorism. The Americans will argue, of course, that the success of such missions against high-profile wanted terrorists as bin Laden or al-Awlaki justify the loss of innocent life that often results from these attacks. Now, the New York Times reported that the attacks were clear evidence that Obama is continuing and in some cases expanding the Bush administration policy. He has argued that Pakistan's sovereignty was subservient to US interests. Is that an acceptable position to take?
It is so shameful. I just find it amazing that in the 21st century, a country which upholds human rights all over the world, and I remember when I first came as an 18-year-old, we looked up to the American democracy, the protection of human rights, the liberties given to their citizens. I mean, that's what we were inspired by. And to think that that country today uses drones, someone sitting 4,000 miles away on a computer screen, basically is eliminating suspects. Remember, these are suspects. Their wives, their children, their neighbors, anyone gets in the way. And then is this the way to fight a war? And is this being, the next question, is this succeeding? It is totally counterproductive. The American ambassador in Pakistan, Ann Patterson, in WikiLeaks, is reported to be telling State Department that these drone attacks are completely counterproductive. In fact, they raise the hatred against the Americans in Pakistan increases. And who does that help? The militants. And since most of the civilian people killed are innocent civilians in the drone attacks, their relatives all go to seek revenge by becoming militants. The tribal area is the people they're living is the ultimate warrior race. They have resisted every invader. Every man is a warrior. Every man carries a gun, a weapon, knows how to use it. And revenge is an integral part of their character. So when a relative gets killed, in seeking revenge, they go and join the militants. It is insane what is happening there. Every year, the level of violence goes up. The militants get stronger. They're not losing the war. And so all they have to do to win is not to lose. And unfortunately, somehow the policymakers in the United States do not understand how futile this is. All they're doing is they're increasing hatred against themselves by these insane tactics.
Now, would it surprise you to learn that the Pentagon now has some 7,000 aerial drones, compared with fewer than 50 a decade ago, has asked Congress for nearly $5 billion for drones in 2012. This week I've read that the UK Ministry of Defence will spend over £500 million on acquiring and sustaining armed Reaper drones on operations in Afghanistan between 2007 and 2015. Does any of that surprise you?
Well, if this was so successful, why aren't they winning the war? Why did the surge fail in Afghanistan? Why have they, if they've eliminated so many high-value targets, why is the insurgency growing? And if they were only reported to be about 100 Al-Qaeda, how many people have they killed so far? This is so, unfortunately, as they said, the first thing which is a casualty in war is the truth. People in the Western countries don't know what's going on. For someone who has his party in the tribal areas, we keep getting feedback. And the feedback is that people so hate this, the drone attacks, and as a result of this anti-Americanism is growing. It's growing in Pakistan. In fact, our society, not only is it anti-Americanism, but they also hate the government for allowing this to happen, because this is being done in complicity with the Pakistan government. It's bizarre that people don't understand this. Not just that the moral point of view, that this violates all humanitarian laws made in the West. It is also insane because it's counterproductive.
Now, you've indicated that the US wrongly conflates the Taliban with Al-Qaeda, and that distinguishing between the two, and I'm quoting you, is the key to America sorting out its objectives. Well, can you possibly explain to me what you see as their objectives in this context? And is it really to destroy Al-Qaeda?
Well, presumably, I'll just go by what the Americans say, that they want to stop world terrorism or threat to their citizens. Well, threat to their citizens would come from Al-Qaeda, which has the brain power to attack them. The Pashtuns or the Taliban, who basically now they're fighting in Afghanistan, and Pakistan army is fighting in Pakistan, have never been involved in any international terrorism. So this is not the enemy. What they're doing is they're actually helping Al-Qaeda by taking on the Pashtuns. Now, the more they kill them, the more they'll fight them, as happened with the Russians, before that happened to the British. There's a history of, before Mughals, Alexander downwards, this area has fought any foreign occupation. So by prolonging this war, they are just creating more and more enemies in this part of the world, the Pashtuns, who were never involved in international terrorism. But worse, it is going to, it is coming across not as a war against terror, but war against Islam in the Muslim world. Once it's war against Islam, there is no end to holy warriors. People will fight for their religion all over the Muslim world. It's so dangerous, this tactic which is being used. I don't know what aims they have. If the aim was to fight terrorism, this is absolutely the wrong way of going about it.
And is the war against the Taliban, is that a legitimate war?
First of all, the Taliban were not involved in any terrorism. They were being accused of harboring a terrorist. And in Mullah Zaif's book, who was the ambassador, Mullah Zaif was the ambassador, Taliban ambassador to Pakistan. In the book, he states that Mullah Omar was willing to hand over Osama bin Laden, not to the Americans, but to a third country, to Hague or to a Muslim country. But the Americans, wouldn't hear of anything. So in my opinion, if you go back with hindsight, if the Americans had at that time had a bit more patience, I admit that what they went through was awful. But had they had a bit more patience, this world would not have gone through this. Because it is possible that the Taliban would have handed him over. It took them under 4 weeks to attack a country. They were only given under 4 weeks. Surely war should have been the last resort rather than the first option.
But it was 10 years before bin Laden was essentially finally targeted. That's a long time, isn't it?
What I'm saying is that if bin Laden was responsible for 9/11, they should have given, at least Taliban were not responsible for bin Laden, they inherited him. Bin Laden was trained by the CIA in Afghanistan to fight a jihad. People like bin Laden were heroes 20 years back. So Taliban only took power in 96. And when bin Laden became, he was already living there. He was a war hero. So all I'm saying is that this mess that has been created, it could easily have been avoided if at that time, longer time was spent in trying to get bin Laden into some court of law, either in Hague or internationally. We would have been spared all this. Taliban were not terrorists. They were fundamentalists. There's a big difference.
Well, we're just going to go to a short break. Join us again, we'll be back in just a moment. Welcome back to In Focus, where I'm delighted to be joined again by Imran Khan. Mr. Khan, we were talking about the Taliban just a moment ago. One prominent organisation, the Revolutionary Association of the Women of Afghanistan, which defined itself as the oldest political and social organisation of women in Afghanistan, described the situation there as thus: Taliban, they say, treat women worse than they treat animals. In fact, even as Taliban declare the keeping of caged birds and animals illegal, they imprison Afghan women within the four walls of their own houses. Women have no importance in Taliban's eyes unless they're occupied producing children, satisfying male sexual needs, or attending to the drudgery of daily housework. Now, you've sometimes been described, I think, as an apologist for the Taliban. What do you think of the position of the RAWA? Are they misguided? Is that statement, in terms of being an apologist, totally inappropriate?
It is completely ridiculous. To say that Taliban were not terrorists is just a fact. It doesn't mean you're an apologist for someone. It means that this whole carnage which is going on could have been avoided if this distinction had been made between the Taliban and Al-Qaeda. Simple as that. As for the treatment of women, I'm afraid, I'm a follower of the great Iqbal. Iqbal was one of the most enlightened Muslim scholars, in my opinion, in the last 500 years. So anyone who follows Iqbal would understand, the true essence of the religion. So by just pointing out a fact about the Taliban, as I said, the fundamentalists, but this goes even beyond fundamentalism, what you've read out. It does not mean that I'm apologizing for them or I support their way of how they see Islam.
Now, you've been quite outspoken about what you feel is the need for US troops to leave Afghanistan. You have stated that all the tribes in the region are used to fighting each other. But when a foreigner comes along, I think as you said earlier on, they all get together. They've been doing it for hundreds of years. Now, no one can see the end game, you said, unless America leaves the region. In June this year, President Obama finally pledged to remove 33,000 troops by September of next year and a complete withdrawal of combat troops by 2014. Is that what you've been asking for?
The US has a completely confused policy about Afghanistan. First of all, there was General Petraeus' surge He was successful in Iraq. In my opinion, debatable until the US troops leave. Only then we'll find out how successful it was. And he felt it would be successful in Afghanistan, and he convinced President Obama. I think it was a big mistake, because all the surge did was it killed a lot of innocent people. Because remember, there's no army of Taliban. These are fighters living amongst villages and common people, have the support of the people because they are fellow Pashtuns. The Taliban ceased to become Taliban the moment the Americans attacked them. The moment they were attacked, they became Pashtuns. What you're seeing today is a Pashtun resistance against the Americans on Pakistan's side, in the tribal belt, and on the other side in Afghanistan. The Americans have no plan B once the surge failed. They wanted the surge to thrash the Taliban or inflict enough damage on them so that they would come on the table to talk. It didn't happen. They haven't come on the table. In fact, they feel much more confident now than before. Now, there's a total confusion. They don't know what to do now. They are sort of fighting them, and then they also want a dialogue. In my opinion, there should be a clear-cut strategy, ceasefire, dialogue. Get all the participants on the table. Get the neighboring country, Iran, Pakistan, and the Afghan government also on the table, and along with the Americans, and thrash out some sort of a peace settlement. It is the only way to go about it. If they keep going like this will go on. It's gone on for 10 years. I can see it go on for another 10 years.
This week I've read news reports that the Afghani officials will be allowed finally to travel to Pakistan to investigate the suicide assassination of President Burhanuddin Rabbani, which all but derailed a peace initiative which he was leading. It has been suggested that Pakistan's intelligence services were involved in that plot. How significant was the assassination in the first place, as we've talked about trying to get the Taliban to the table to talk, and how credible are those allegations of the intelligence services for Pakistan being complicit in that process?
Well, for a start, whether Rabbani would have been able to get them together is a debatable thing. But anyone who killed him, there should be a proper investigation done, because he was in any case trying to get some sort of a peace settlement. So why would Pakistan have him killed? Because the country that is losing most in this conflict is Pakistan. As I said, 35,000 dead, over $70 billion lost to the economy, total security situation in disarray. So it would be in our interest to have a peace settlement. So yes, we should help the Afghans, the Afghan government in any way which we can to find out who was behind this murder. But to blame Pakistan for this, or for that matter, you go a step further, the Haqqani network. For that, the reason why the Americans cannot succeed in Afghanistan is because of Haqqani network. And you talk about 5,000 or 6,000 fighters. Just imagine that there's 140,000 troops in Afghanistan, NATO troops, the greatest military machine in the history of mankind. It cannot win because of these 5,000 or 6,000 Rambos operating from Pakistan. It doesn't make sense. And it reminds me, when I was in university, it reminds me of the failure in Vietnam being blamed on Cambodia, insurgents coming from Cambodia, being bombed. Cambodia was bombed. 1 million people died in the destabilization that took place in Cambodia. We are heading the same way.
Now, you talk about the Haqqani Rambos. There have been claims that Pakistan has been reluctant to take on the Haqqani network and have openly allowed it to maintain safe havens from which it attacks Americans. Now, Hillary Clinton, the Secretary of State, said that Pakistan can either be part of the solution or a part of the problem. She also stated that the US would act unilaterally if Islamabad failed to crack down on the Taliban-linked Haqqani network. What do you make of these statements made by the Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton?
If we had a strong government in Pakistan, they would have reacted very strongly to that. A country that loses 35,000 dead for someone else's war. This was never our war. Uh, until we, on American instructions, sent our troops into the tribal areas, we did not have a militant Taliban in Pakistan. We did not have the sort of suicide. In our entire history, we would have had about 5 or 10 suicide attacks. There were 300 last year. There are probably more this year. I mean, the country is imploding under this. And then to be told, already 140,000 troops are spread all along the tribal belt. The Americans want us to go to North Waziristan, where there might be 5 or 6,000 Haqqani fighters, but there are 350,000 human beings living there. These Haqqani, these fighters would be living amongst these villages. So imagine the sort of collateral damage this sort of operation would cost the people, these 350,000 people. And imagine to seek revenge where they would go. They would join the Haqqani fighters. I mean, Pakistan army is already overstretched. To think of another operation, the fallout on the cities, they will end up suicide bombings in the cities. Already, as I said, we've got a record amount of suicide attacks. I mean, they're talking about Pakistan being sacrificed for a useless war, a war that has no aims. What is the objective of this war? What would Americans call victory in Afghanistan? I still don't know. But imagine for that, for the quagmire they've got stuck in, which every occupation force has got stuck in, they want Pakistan to actually exacerbate the situation on the ground already, which the country can't cope with.
Now, you talked about what would Americans call a victory in Afghanistan. It's a difficult question. It's a sort of question that they must have faced when they were fighting in Vietnam. How can they leave with some sort of grace and dignity? In your opinion, what's the solution for them?
There is only one solution. There has to be a peace settlement. And they should not leave like the way they abandoned Afghanistan in 1989. Reason why we have Taliban and all Al-Qaeda today is because in 1989, after the Soviets withdrew, Afghanistan was abandoned. So was Pakistan. Pakistan was abandoned. There was a Pressler sanction slapped on Pakistan after it had sort of helped in that, fighting the Soviets. So what should not happen is that they should leave immediately. What should happen is that immediately there should be a dialogue of all people, which could possibly bring peace there, which includes the Taliban. And the sooner you start that, the better. But it will only start if there's a ceasefire. If there's still these night operations, drone attacks going on, bombing going on, I'm afraid, as I said, this could keep going on and on.
Now, we here in the UK are consistently aware of the numbers of UK soldiers who give up their lives in this particular battle, and the count continues in the hundreds. And similarly, losses in the United States, but we very rarely hear the toll from Pakistani soldiers and indeed those in Afghanistan. Do you think that situation is correct?
Just yesterday, there were 14 Pakistani soldiers get killed in one attack, then another 10 who get killed in another attack. Not to mention the who they call militants being killed, but we don't know because you do not know who gets killed when you do bombing and bombing villages. There can never be any verification of who gets killed by the drones because there's no presence of either American or Pakistani troops where the drones attack. And normally, if you read the Pakistani reports, either they say the bodies were charred beyond recognition, or it is that they were blown to pieces. And since there's no DNA testing there, who knows who's being killed? Which is why there is so much hatred, growing hatred against the Americans in the tribal belt. And which is why the insurgency doesn't even look like weakening. In fact, it's if anything, they're stronger. So, in my opinion, only way forward is dialogue and peace. It's not going to be easy, and the longer this is delayed, it's going to get more difficult. And my worry is that the Americans might end up leaving Afghanistan because of their own financial problems, leaving the country in a bigger mess than they found it.
Now, I just want to move on to another topic. 2011 has seen one of the worst drought disasters, one of the worst flooding disasters, sorry, for quite some time in Pakistan. Yet, the international media, the government, and the NGOs seem to be somewhat muted in their response. It's a little bit uncanny, in fact. What do you see as the reason behind it? There's been some suggestion that in some of the regions, because they're non-Muslim, that they're perhaps not attracting the same sort of energy and response.
This is not true. I mean, I have set up a foundation, and we're doing a lot of work in Sindh. Last year, when the floods came, they affected all the 4 provinces. This year, when the floods have come, they've only affected the southern province of Sindh and to the south of it. And it is, I mean, even I did not know the extent of devastation until I went there. And I don't think people would understand the consequences because there was not much loss of life. So there is a feeling that, everything is okay. But actually, economically, that whole area has been devastated. And I think we will feel the country will feel the repercussions for quite a while. It's not because it's non-Muslims. They're everyone. In fact, majority are Muslims. Vast majority are Muslims who have been affected. My foundation is doing a lot of work there. There are other NGOs, but unfortunately, the government hasn't. It is such a corrupt and incompetent government that they have not really done much there at all.
So this is more about incompetence than about a decisive decision to limit the knowledge of this getting out.
Even last year when the floods came, it was sheer incompetence by the government, but the people of the country rose up. And everyone I knew last year participated in the relief efforts. Everyone I knew. Every Pakistani I knew participated. This year, unfortunately, it has not got as much coverage. And as I said, had I not gone there, I would not have realized the extent of the disaster.
Now, we're sadly reaching the end of our enlightening conversation. I'd just like to ask you about your future prospects. 2 weeks ago, as you said, there was a turning point. What will a future Pakistan look like under a Khan government, if that's a prospect? And should the US possibly be, and possibly the elite in Pakistan be shaking in their shoes?
Well, 25th December is our second big rally. And we think it'll be even bigger in Karachi, and we think it'll be even bigger than Lahore. But these are very important to show that the public has changed. The reason why everyone got the shock of their lives, the political circles, because no one expected the public to come out in such numbers. And this was not seen for 30, 40 years back. And that even then there's speculation that it was even bigger than 30, 40 years ago. But this one in Karachi could be decisive. And if we can get the sort of numbers we think we will on Christmas Day, I think it will completely change Pakistan's politics in the sense that, Tehreek-e-Insaf will just rise above all the other political players. And so does the elite need to be scared? No, it doesn't need to be scared because they will have to pay taxes. But it will be for their benefit because even the elite today is scared that is Pakistan going to survive? And there's so much lawlessness that rich people are even more at threat than the common people because there's sort of kidnappings going on for ransom. The sort of lawlessness is actually affecting the rich classes more. So no, they don't need to be scared. In fact, we would ensure rule of law, but we will collect taxes, and they will have to give taxes, but only what is the right of the state. Secondly, the U.S. it doesn't need to get scared because it needs the time of patronizing puppets, stooges in Muslim world is gone. If they haven't realized it, they will in a little while. Even in the Middle East, what you're seeing now is because of social media, because of an explosion of information, people have changed. And they're not going to allow this sort of Mubarak-type puppets. In Pakistan, we have Zardari as an American puppet sitting there. He has neither delivered to the people of Pakistan, neither has he delivered to the Americans. All he has done is that his Swiss bank accounts have got bigger. The time has come to back genuine democracies in Muslim world. And, you know, the US should expect friends, but not slaves. So if they're expecting the PTI government to be the same puppet government like the current one, well, it won't happen. But if they want friends who don't have friends, means that you don't have to say yes to everything. And you will say no if to protect the interest of your own people. Well, they can be, yes, as friends, yes.
So will the sovereignty of Pakistan be more significant, more important than the interests of the US?
Well, as it has been proved that by bartering away our sovereignty for a little amount of aid, it has actually cost the country a hell of a lot. It has, in fact, it has brought us to the verge of collapse. So there's no question of ever not being sovereign in Pakistan. And I think that the US also, the policy makers will be thinking that is this the way they are going to deal with the world, having slaves in the Muslim world especially. The US should have the same relationship with Pakistan as it has with India. With India, it doesn't matter who comes. It's a relationship with the people of India. It's with the democracy, Indian democracy. But with Pakistan, they want stooges like Zardari. So I think it's time they had relationship with the people of Pakistan.
Well, on that very profound note, I say it's been a real pleasure speaking to you, Imran Khan. Thank you for joining us on Islam Channel.
My pleasure.